So, welcome to a webcast on our new release, Visure Requirements 4.5. It's titled Streamline Your Requirements Management Process. We chose this title on purpose because we think that our new release really helps you streamlining and simplifying your efforts on the requirements management processes. I'll walk you through um, some basic aspects on how to manage requirements efficiently. We'll focus on the changes we've introduced in the latest release of Visure Requirements, and would also like to introduce you to some changes we made on our integrations. Um, we'll need about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how many questions you have at the end. So my suggestion is we keep questions until the end. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to put them into the chat window. We'll get to them at the end of the webcast. I won't be monitoring that too closely while presenting because it's pretty distracting most of the time. So the agenda for today's meeting is, as I just said, we'll talk about how to manage requirements efficiently. We'll talk about what's new in the release and how to integrate it into your process and tool landscape. Gartner is not really known for focusing on stuff that is not really fancy. You can maybe even recognize this by the fact that they issue a hype cycle for things. So they typically jump on things that are really up in the news, that are really on the edge of things. So it was a bit of a surprise, not really a surprise, but we didn't expect Gartner to say that in times where everybody's talking about agile development and talking about, well, the need for processes and the need for requirements is not that high anymore. Right at that point, Gartner said requirements still form the foundation of software quality. They still put a huge focus on making sure your requirements are right, making sure your requirements are correct to produce quality software. And it's fair to extend this also to systems, not only software, obviously. And also, they put some emphasis on the requirements gathering process. So when you make sure that you gather your requirements right, things will dramatically improve. This is not news, but the new thing is actually that the analysts keep bringing it up again. So they might have recognized that some focus has shifted too much in the last years. So it might be worth going back to the foundation of things, to the requirements of systems engineering, and put some more focus on this. The reason why I say that is I would like to focus on what is important. We came up with about 5 things that are really important on requirements management. And I'm not just saying that to have a slide more. It is, we've tailored our last release around those findings. So we would like to make sure that requirements that you put into the system are correct. We would like to make sure that they're complete, that everybody involved is following a consistent approach, and the requirements are written in a consistent way, that it helps you provide traceability from the very beginning to the actual deliverables. And last but not least, I mentioned the requirements gathering process in the beginning, and I think that's still key to most of the organizations we talk to. It's participation, involvement. You might remember 20 years ago, the Standish Group had that analysis on why projects fail, and a huge portion in that analysis showed that the lack of user involvement is an issue. I'd like to extend that actually, the lack of stakeholder involvement, meaning everybody who is not just the user of the actual system at the end, but everybody who is involved in building the system needs to participate in the requirements process. And we'll talk about how we help you do that. The major change in Visure Requirements 4.5 is basically this one. We have introduced one type to rule them all, and it's not as dark as it might be in the Lord of the Rings. What we had for a long time in IQA and in Visure Requirements were repositories that could contain lots and lots and lots of things. That's not changing, but the way how you deal with that is changing. So, for example, in 4.4, we had requirements, we had services, we had test scenarios. And if you wanted to follow a trace from your requirements to your test services, to your test scenarios, and you wanted to find out whether that test has failed or not, that was quite a challenge in some situations. So we decided to focus on the one thing, what makes all this application worth being around, requirements. And then we started a long discussion. I joined Visure Requirements back again. I was here before, and I joined back again in December. And that discussion had already started a long time before, and the decision hadn't been made until briefly before I joined. We had a long discussion about how to call it. Is it requirements only? No, that's too narrow, because we're not throwing away any of the services. We're not throwing away any of the testing. We decided to call it items. An item is anything that is related to requirements. It's any kind of information. It might be a requirement itself. It might be a sub-requirement. It might be a detailed requirement. It might be a business need. It might be a test case. It might be a change request. It might be anything that is in some way related to requirements and has some natural description. The good thing about this is everything is equal. And it is not like requirements are more equal than other things. Everything is equal now. You can import, export, and report on everything in the system. You can, for everything, define your own relations. It's not like we have predefined some things as we had in the past. You can have a hierarchy for everything. You can use the group by attribute for everything. The API serves everything, and it's not that just certain things don't apply to test cases or certain things don't apply to services. Everything is an item now, so you can use the full wealth of features and capabilities for items. We do still support the pre-4.5 repositories. We call them classic mode repositories. But a few things to note here. One is if you create a new repository, by default, it will be an item mode repository. And you will most probably only find that term item mode in the online help where we talk about the what's new. Because everything within the application is tailored around this, so there's no need to spell it out. We do still support those classic mode repositories. When creating a repository, there's a checkbox. You can say, make this repository classic repository. We strongly recommend to migrate to your old project to the new ones. But as there are some challenges involved, we ask you to work with our professional services to migrate. I'll talk about this a bit later. The first thing that you will most probably notice is a huge change in the UI. We've simplified it a lot. This is something which is 4.5, but on a classic repository. If you look at the views, there's everything you can imagine on services, on test scenarios and things. If you look at the same view in a new repository, an item mode repository, the views are tailored to the items. They show you just the list of things that are relevant to you right now. And I have to admit, this is a short list. But it's no longer confusing the people who don't know the complete application inside out. I was talking about participation in the beginning. Involving people who don't write requirements every day is a huge challenge for everyone working with requirements. I guess you all made that experience. So making sure that those users find what they need is exactly one of your biggest challenges within your organization. By cleaning this up and making this a lot more intuitive, I think we've made a huge step forward here. Then we would like to make you write correct requirements. We have been offering something called Visure Quality Analyzer for quite a while now. And what that system does is really powerful. It allows you to, well, the old integration allowed you to analyze requirements basically overnight and provide some summary on how good the requirement is, how well it was written, whether there were ambiguous terms, how well does it fit to your boilerplates and those things. That's not going away, not at all. But what we're planning to do is embed this even more into the application. So for within a couple of weeks, that's why it says more to come, you will get authoring support. Our partner company, the reuse company who's building all the backend for this, who have all the brain power to prepare all that data, they have enhanced their offering to provide real-time authoring support, and we'll be embedding this relatively close within our application, so you can benefit from that. And going forward, this will merge even more with our own offering. So at some point in time, you will hopefully not even recognize that it is a third-party offering which is integrated in our solution, but it will behave like it is a built-in capability. Consistent in process, that's, I don't think, a huge news for you, right? But if you know Visure Requirements, you might recognize a couple of changes here. In earlier versions, we had indicators in the lower right-hand side of those boxes, the blocks, indicating whether it was a requirement, service, test scenario. Those are all gone because, as I said, everything is equal now. The other change you might recognize is this here. You can define your own motives for relations to tests. And I have to apologize that I skipped the services in that slide, but it just looks a bit cleaner. And again, not a huge change, being consistency even across processes. What you saw before was a V model. So as the Americans would say, something waterfallish, which always sounds pretty like old school, which doesn't mean it's bad. But you might have pockets within your organization who would like to go agile. And being agile does never mean you don't have to worry about requirements. In fact, it means the opposite. If you want to be agile, you would like to provide something of value, and something that doesn't comply with your requirements will most probably not provide too much value. So even within the agilistas and the people who push agile development, you will never find someone who doesn't understand the value of requirements. But the way how people work with those requirements, how they decompose them to stories, how they work with them, how they organize them, how they prioritize them is different. The nice thing about our solution is you can define both processes and have the information be available for both ends, for the old school waterfallish approach and for the, shall I say, modern agile approach. And again, everything is an item, no matter whether it's a requirement, a story, a task, a sprint, a change request, whatever. It's all the same, which means you can run similar reports for your waterfall project and your agile project without having to tailor them specifically to tests, to services, and so on. When you look at traceability analysis, I brought up this example earlier. You might recognize that with classic mode repositories, it sometimes requires some steps to get to the result that you would actually like to achieve. With the information we have available right now, you can display anything you would like to display in one view. There is no built-in borders within the software anymore. It can all be displayed in one grid, having a requirement on the left-hand side, sub-requirements in the middle, tests and their test results on the right-hand side. Or you can use the document view to make all this available, or you can use the relationship by mode view to make all this available. So it can all be defined in one view, no need to switch views over and over again. I mentioned this before, right? Not a huge change, but you can now include requirements, services, and tests in here. And for example, show the requirements, their priority, the tests and their priority, and the test results in the same view. Include the tests and the documents, or include them in the sort by attribute view. Just to reiterate, everything is equal. So a workflow defined for a certain block will be valid for everything inside that block, whether it is a service, a test case, a requirement, a sub-requirement, whatever. So the whole application, and I'm pretty sure you'll recognize that very quickly, works the same way, cradle to grave. From the beginning to the end, it is all the same. And if you already have a huge set of test cases around and you would like to import them, yes, you can. You can import them as items. Same for requirements. You can just run the importer and do all that. The API does exactly the same. And for those of you who might be using Doors these days, this is one of our vehicles to migrate from Doors to Visure Requirements. So you can use your Doors data and import it into our solution, even for round tripping. And it doesn't matter whether the information you're importing is a requirement, a sub-requirement, a test case, or whatever. I mentioned migration earlier in this webcast. There are a couple of challenges we'll have to go through. One is, for example, test scenarios had detailed test steps in the classic mode. As those steps don't make too much sense for requirements, for example, or for a change request or whatever, those steps do not exist as default data in item repositories. So we'd have to do an analysis of how your current ecosystem looks like, how you manage requirements today, how information is stored today in your classic mode repositories, how you work with that data in pre-4.5 repositories. We'd have to look at current integrations with existing tools. I'll get to the integration part in a couple of minutes. We'd have to figure out how we would possibly have to transform data so it fits the item mode repositories, and then execute that migration after thoroughly planning it. And we typically would like to do that in test environment, obviously, before deploying that change to production. And as it might require some change in your processes, we'd be happy to support you in the first phase of adopting the new release. Having said all this, I don't want to scare those of you who are considering migrating your data from classic mode to item mode. It can be very, very simple. It can be just a flag in the database that makes the repository tell Visure Requirements that it is now an item mode repository, and that's it. In fact, I had some repositories myself that I could just switch immediately. And there are certain rules. For example, if you only use the requirements portion in Visure Requirements today anyway, you're not using services, you're not using test scenarios, and I know some of you do that. It's just a flag in the database that needs to be changed. However, we'd like to make sure that everything is going smoothly, and would like to keep an eye on which flags you change in our database. So we would like to assist you in doing that instead of having to repair it afterwards. If you're using services and test cases, there might be some more work around this. There might be some migration effort, but that's why we have a package defined that our professional services team is happy to talk to you about. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to your local representative, your technical account manager, or directly to our headquarters, and we'd be happy to help you. Something else that we'll be doing in summer is we'll change the way how we maintain the software. I know that some changes that we rolled out in version 4.5 have been sitting in our basically in our release lab for several months. So the development was completed, let's say, a year ago. QA was completed 10 months ago, but we had no vehicle to make those changes available to you. That is painful. That is painful for you because you're waiting for it. It is painful for us because we have it fixed. We can't get it to you. So what we did is we have prepared the application for patches, regular patches, which required some changes on the backend. And in summer, we'll start issuing scheduled monthly patches. So every month, there will be a new patch on our support side that you can download, apply to your system, and benefit from the recent changes that our maintenance team has introduced. Those patches will be cumulative. So if you don't see the need to apply those patches once they're made available, you can skip 1, 2, 3, 4 of them and apply the fifth one. And in the fifth one will obviously have all the changes that were shipped in the previous patches. Those patches will not require a database change. So you can have different clients on different patch levels. That's not something we would recommend, but taking reality into account, we know this will happen. However, those patches will include bug fixes. They will fix bugs. They are not meant to introduce new capabilities. They are not meant to deliver huge changes. They will fix bugs. What we will stop doing, and I'll say that pretty frankly, knowing that there will be exceptions, we'll stop doing hotfixes. We will only hotfix to fix showstoppers. So there might be issues or requests which are urgent, but we anticipate that it should be fair to wait for them 1, 2, 3, the worst case 4 weeks until the next patch is available. If it keeps you from working, obviously, let's have a discussion and make sure we get this addressed. But what we'd like to do is reduce the amount of unplanned work, which I don't think is new to you. I'm pretty sure you have similar initiatives in your organizations. And by doing this, we will certainly improve in our ability to deliver with complete scope and in time. So I think that's a huge step forward. We'll start to release those patches starting in summer, which we're still debating whether we start doing this before the summer vacation or not. But you will benefit from this pretty soon. When I talked about participation and integrating Visure Requirements to your ecosystem, I meant involving stakeholders, yes. I meant involving stakeholders in using Visure Requirements, yes. But I also meant involving stakeholders using different tools. So you might have someone who's using Atlassian Jira to manage change requests who are either derived from your requirements or will feed into your requirements. Or you might have someone using Team Foundation Server doing similar things. Or you might have someone do work in HP to manage your tests. So there's a couple of solutions around this, and I'd like to introduce you to one of them in particular, because it's a brand new one and it's a new one that will open a huge door for you and for us. I'll walk through the slide and then I'll focus on the one that I'd like to talk more about. On the lower left-hand side, you can see the reuse company requirements quality suite. I mentioned this before when we talked about the correctness and completeness of requirements. And what you can see here is a screenshot of what they call the rat, and it's not meant to be the animal. It is the requirements authoring tool. I'm pretty sure we'll have some exciting news on that in a couple of weeks. This has been there for a while. It is still there, and it will improve as we go forward. On the lower right-hand side, you can see Atlassian Jira. Again, has been here for a while. We've updated it to the latest versions of Atlassian Jira, 5.something2, I think, to work with our solution. We're currently in the final stages of testing this, so this will be made available to you during summer as well. The upper right-hand side has three interesting partners. LDRA and Aldec are two partners who are actually including our requirements management solution in their test solutions. LDRA more focused on software certification, Aldec more focused on hardware. Aldec will be releasing a new release in May, June, which will include Visure Requirements 4.5. LDRA have already integrated it. And that's good news for everyone working with those companies together. HP, I bet you all know HP. I bet you all know HP ALM. And we're partnering very heavily with HP because they start recognizing that they can manage requirements up to a certain extent. But when it comes to proper traceability, when it comes to reuse, when it comes to proper attributing requirements, when it comes to more complex product line scenarios, that's not what HPLM is made for. It is great in managing tests and planning tests and having other software execute tests. So we're improving on our HP integration basically every day, and you see some nice changes coming there in the next, let me say, months. But the existing integration is obviously updated and available as well. The one I would like to focus on in this webcast is ArgoSense. ArgoSense is an integration hub that we've started partnering with just a couple of months ago. The connector to Visure Requirements is currently being developed, so you can expect it in the next weeks. And what it basically will give us is a process-based integration to everything you see on the lower horizontal line and more. Visure Requirements doesn't show up on that list yet because the integration is not completed, is not generally available, but it will in a short amount of time. But the way this integration works, and if you want to know more about this, please see argosense.com, is you can map attributes to the integration hub, and then you can define processes within that integration hub that will execute certain events. So for example, you can say once a requirement is set to complete, assuming you have that attribute, the integration hub will pick up that requirement and populate it to, let's say, Microsoft TFS, so a developer can pick it up and work on it. And when the developer in TFS marks his or her change as done, this will be reflected back to the requirement. And so you can integrate multiple solutions based on processes using that integration solution. A very simple use case would possibly look like this. You have business analysts working in Visure Requirements based on change requests that developer might put in through Jira, or you decompose requirements to a level where they turn into change requests that the developer would pick up and develop and record the change in Jira, the process. Once development is completed, we make the requirement available to HP, QC, or ALM. The tester will execute the test, report any defects to the developer using Jira by integrating HP and Jira using the ArgoSense integration platform. So you can define your whole process within that system, and it will make sure that all relevant information is available at the respective stakeholder at the time when he needs it. We'll do a more focused webinar just on those capabilities once the software is available. As I said, this will be in the next couple of weeks, so please stay tuned. And that's it. Completed a rough overview on changes in version 4.5. We talked about how to migrate from 4.4 or classic mode repositories to native 4.5 repositories. And we hope that it gave you an idea of where we're heading. If you want to know more about the detailed changes, feel free to reach out to us. If you would like to understand more about our services offerings, we're happy to help you. And right now, I'll have a look at the questions that came up. Let me see. There we go. Question about languages and the quality analyzer. The quality analyzer currently supports Spanish and English, no German yet. It might be worth a discussion. A question on patches, whether they are for both classic and item mode. In general, yes. However, if you, for example, find an issue in the services section, it will have a lower priority than an issue in the requirement section. So in general, we'll focus on everything that is item related. Everything about the specifics of services and test scenarios that are deprecated will not have too much focus on the patches. If that is important to you, please let us know, and we're happy to discuss that. And the last question here on the pricing of ArgoSense. Can't read this completely, but referring to the ArgoSense pricing, if you talk to ArgoSense directly, their offering is quite expensive. If you talk to us about tailored Visure to ArgoSense or Visure to, let's say, Enterprise Architect or HP or whatever integrations, there's a different pricing associated to that. In general, I would say the value of ArgoSense, I said I'll focus on this more when we do a dedicated ArgoSense webcast. The value of ArgoSense is not just copying data from A to B, like vanilla integrations do. The value of ArgoSense really comes to play when you look at the process and how you use such integration hubs to make your data available based on defined events in your processes. So you actually have to worry about it once when you define the process, but you don't have to worry about it as you go and as you basically work using that tool environment. Any more questions? Sounds like a no. Looks like a no. So thank you for your time. Appreciate your participation. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.